culture of the Armenians.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for Adelaide.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And Deputy Speaker, can I congratulate the member for North Sydney and the other speakers before me for bringing this motion to the House of Representatives. And it would be remiss of me if I didn't participate in this debate as a member of this Parliament who represents one of Australia's largest Greek Australian communities, many of whom are descendants of those atrocities that took place that we're discussing here today. So I rise to support this motion, which recognises the United Nations International Day commemoration and dignity of the victims of the crimes of genocide and the prevention of this crime. But I also rise to support this motion that accurately recognises the genocides committed by the Ottoman Empire between 1915 and 1923 of Greeks, Armenians, Assyrians and other Christian minorities in what was known as Asia Minor, and one of the greatest crimes against humanity in modern history. Now, Deputy Speaker, the term genocide is relatively new in historical terms. Genocide itself isn't a very old term. It's been used, and it was developed partly in response to the horrendous murder of Jewish people during the Holocaust, but it also in response to the brutal cleansing that took place in this campaign committed by the Ottoman Empire between 1915 and 1923. In this period, millions of Greeks, Armenians, Assyrians and other Christian minorities from the Pontus region and other parts of modern-day Turkey were deported, massacred or marched to their deaths. And some of these stories have been handed down, it's only 2 generations ago. In fact, my son's best friend, his grandparents came from Pontus. He was a small child, and I recall him telling us the story of the long march from the Pontus region through to modern-day Greece. Along that march, many perished by death through starvation, being murdered along the way through illnesses, etc. And it's approximately 300,000 people that lost their lives. It was a brutal cleansing campaign. Deputy Speaker, it all started in the early morning of April 24th, 1915, when the Ottoman authorities arrested some 250 Armenian political, religious, educational and intellectual leaders and community figureheads in the capital, Constantinople, marking the first stage of the Ottoman Turks' attempt to exterminate the Armenian, Assyrian and Greek population of that Ottoman Empire. The Greek genocide began with a series of programs in eastern Thrace and the Aegean coast of Anatolia, beginning in January 1914, when the Ottoman Turkish government declared that only those Greeks who became Muslims or would change their religion would be allowed to remain in Thrace. Maps and history were rewritten. Churches, schools and cultural monuments were desecrated and misnamed. Even stories of children being snatched from their parents, and they would be renamed and farmed out to be raised as Ottomans. Deputy Speaker, on that particular day, 300 kilometres south of the Empire's capital, young Australian men began to fight against the Ottoman soldiers during the Gallipoli campaign, one of the most significant and formative events in the military history of Australia. And some of those first documented evidences of genocide taking place were by Anzacs. Some who were prisoners and witnessed some of the atrocities and began writing little notes on pieces of paper that still exist today. Deputy Speaker, the neglect and the plight of the peoples of this region, the Assyrians, the Greeks and the Armenians, ensured that it was just an absolute bloodbath in terms of a cleansing that took place. It absolutely is something that should be recognised by our government and by this Parliament. As we heard earlier, President Biden has recognised it. Many countries around the world have recognised the genocide, and it's about time that we did too, because if we don't recognise humanity's mistakes, they're there to be committed again. And it's not about putting one ethnicity against another. As we heard, we recognise the Holocaust of World War II. It doesn't mean that German people are bad. It just means that we recognise an atrocity so it can never, ever take place again.
The time allotted for